When you're ready, John, please.
Behind them, every honest working man. In unity, there's each other, and your friend becomes your brother. And in the tyrant's thought will be a lesson learned. Give them hope, give them strength, give them life. Like a candle burning in the black of night, we are with you in our hearts and in our minds, and we will pray for our nation through its darkest times. I know that your hearts are made of the first kind. Stick won't kill your peace of mind. One of you fight with all the spirit that you possess, because your fight is a struggle that is best. Give them hope, give them strength, give them life. Like a candle burning in the black of night, we are with you in our hearts and in our minds, and we will pray for a nation through its darkest times. And behind them every honest working man. Join hands with your brother.
Friends, we meet here this afternoon with hearts full of sadness and full of love and admiration as we prepare to bid a last but fond farewell to Thomas Mensi, a punk rock legend from here in South Shields. Mensi was the charismatic singer. The punk rock band, the angelic Upstarts, as you all know, wore his heart on his sleeve and had his fans eaten out of his hand. And they all thought he was their best mate. It was his genuine heart that made Mensi such a great stage presence, as well as a diamond offstage. And our thoughts and love today are with the many thousands that he inspired all over the world and who will grieve his loss deeply, but especially with his family, who will of course miss Thomas the most. Mensi has brought us all together today, and we join in support of one another. That's what family and friends are for. In the midst of sadness and loss, the warmth of understanding and closeness between friends and family is powerful and pure and helps the healing process of our grief just a little. So for all the heartache that we all feel, we can and must remember the wonderful days too. the everydays and mundane and simple things, and every moment you spent together. Indeed, celebrate the life of a man deeply loved and gave so much love in return. I'm Kim, and I'm hugely honoured to have been asked by Mensi's family to help you all today to remember a wonderful man, how he had the time of his life, and such a huge personality. Well, it's easy for me to know where to begin with our story for Mensi today. The difficulty I have is where to end it. So if I do miss anything out, and I'm bound to, I apologise now. Born on the 4th of July 1956, to the delight of his parents, Dorothy and Thomas Mensi, after having 3 daughters, they finally had that little lad. So of course he was spoilt rotten, and that blue-eyed boy, well, he could do no wrong. His sister Elsie will confirm that, and how he was also the only one to get out of going to the likes of Sunday school, or to have them school dinners. Well, as a baby, his parents were living in a flat above the Prince of Wales on Green Lane, known locally as the Billy. A few other families lived above the pub too, all having to share the same landing, an outside loo, and the only water supply was a tap in the yard. But then his parents were offered a house on the newly built Brockley Rings estate. That was where Thomas spent his formative years growing up, and many other parents moving on to the estate with young families too. Well, he made many friends. The Pierces, one of those many families. The late Penny Pierce, in the early days of the band, he was like a bouncer for them. But before his passion for music, back when just a lad, what Thomas was mostly into was making dens, playing cowboys and Indians. So the best Christmas present Santa left him was a cowboy hat and pistols and holsters. He was a big into his pets too. First there was Dusty the rabbit, then Flash, a dog with loads of character and forever running off on adventures, a bit like Mensi really. Then came Rocky, a lush dog and famous for being on the cover of one of the band's songs. Well, the schools he attended included Garnet Infants and Simonside Juniors, and a bright young lad, he passed his 11 plus, gaining an entry into the grammar school, where he began to be a bit of a rebel, not wanting to do his work. So aged 13 he was kicked out and ended up at Stanhope Road School. And the best part then was when the school bell rang for home time. Being a Brocker lad, he mostly hung around the top shops with his mates, often making proper nuisance of themselves. And a massive Sunderland supporter, if you didn't know, Mensi most definitely made a nuisance of himself at their matches. Mal Gates, he was a school kid living in Biddick Hall, and he used to go to all the Sunderland games with the supporters club on buses leaving the Iron Horse in Simonside. He remembers one time when sitting on the bus ready to travel away, his mate says, "Oh no," asking him what was up. The reply he got was, "Mensi's on our bus. We'll be getting into bother." That was the first time he heard the name Mensi, or clapped eyes on him dressed in his denims with turn-ups, black boots and a motorcycle jacket. It seemed from then on he was always on that bus, and yes, every trip always had bother. Like that away trip when they stopped on the way home at Selby Services, only to be greeted by Leeds United fans coming from their game. Tommy being Tommy, didn't he start chanting the song referring to Sunderland beating them in the 73 Cup final? It didn't end well. A trip to the police station and the bus windows being smashed. There was another time on the way to Sheffield, the bus broke down on the motorway, so got the game at half time, reaching the only turnstile open at the ground. "Nobody's paying," Mensi shouts as he jumps the turnstile. Everyone followed suit, and the old fella on the turnstile sat there not knowing what had hit him. Well, Mel says he was a kid, impressionable, and Tommy had his admiration and respect and hadn't even uttered 2 words to him. Then the band came. They practiced at the Percy Hudson Youth Club in Biddick Hall. Mal went everywhere to see them. He was lucky enough a few times to turn up at a gig and see him, Decker and Mond, and get on the guest list. They really looked after him. And regarding the band from the early days, they were just mates. Even though they got all that attention from their fans at those gigs, it was pretty normal to him. And when Mal asked Mensi to sign something for him, He said he felt daft signing it because they were mates, and that always stuck with him. He remembers the time when he boxed at the shack in Bolton when Tommy was there. He won in round 2, so proudly went over to show off his trophy and got a well done, sonner. He was buzzing. Years later, he did some roadie work with the band, and what a buzz that was. And yet more great adventures, of course, adventures that probably are best not said out loud where we are today. But Al says in life he doesn't have heroes, only people who inspire him at the time. And Tommy was the top of the pile for him. And the people who inspired Mensi were those in bands, like The Clash and Sham 69, who he saw perform on Top of the Pops, of course. Most teenagers did back then. Thursday night, Top of the Pops, the big highlight. And it was through watching those bands that gave Mensi the idea to put a band together himself. His mates Mond and Decker had a drum kit and first rehearsed in the Percy Hudson and the Cypress Hotel. The band went from there really with the famous Murder of Little Tower song written in Cyprus. Taking on an anti-fascist and working class philosophy, their music wasn't always well received, but during the first 10 years they released a total of 8 studio albums. Then after a split, reformed in 1988. At one point, Mensi was the only original member of the band, and for all he retired several times, he always went back to the band. A proper front man. He just loved to perform. And so loyal to his many fans, he couldn't bear to let them down, and that he proved the day his mum passed away. For all devastated, he still went out to do his gig. And whether he was performing to a small crowd at 1,000, his enthusiasm was always the same. Mensi, always for the working class, his songs reflected that. The song Woman in Disguise, he wrote all about Thatcher. He read lots of books too, about anti-fascism, and he had a copy of the Quran, I'm told, keen for knowledge. But he believed strongly that the best way to learn and to have knowledge was through travel and experience things for yourself. And he was certainly a well-travelled man, having performed in many places all over the world. He even had a spell living in Thailand and also thought about making his home in France at one point. But he never forgot his roots, his heart always here in South Shields, and where he could always reconnect with his friends and with his family and his mum's. And she was here, and especially close to Elsie. Well, she was the one who always brought order into his life and to pick up after him. Before having kids of his own, her kids, well, he used to take his nephew Dean all over with him. And his niece Zoe became a huge fan of her Uncle Thomas's music and loved seeing the band perform live. She also went on many of those anti-fascist marches with him too. And when news went round that Top of the Pops would be inviting an angelic Upstarts to perform on the show, well, everyone on the estate where he grew up just wanted to experience that. And for all in his mum's eyes, there was no one quite like her Thomas. She did think his music rubbish. But that legendary performance that the band did for all the kids on that estate, top of the garages they were. But the police were called, weren't they, to put a stop to it. But a mega experience many will remember for a long while to come. It was always at the local gigs that they did Mensi enjoyed the most. But before the band and in between times, he did also hold down a variety of regular jobs. His first reaching school leaving age at 15 was at Beat Furnishings as a salesman. Then he had a spell at Westall Pit. But with his love of cars, he then tried his hand at a car dealership. From a very young age, he had a huge passion for cars, and once he passed his test, he got to drive around in all kinds, which included his mum and dad's car that he borrowed without them knowing. But then he crashed it. But of course, the blue-eyed boys that defended him to the hilt. The car Mensi most wanted to get his hands on was a Rolls-Royce. So he saved and saved until he finally got one. But then it just sat there as he couldn't afford to put the petrol in it. Norman and Mickey are just a couple of mates who go back a long way with Mensi, and remember one time when coming from Hatton going to have a look at another jack. They got as far as the bend on the John Reed Road just outside where we are today. Norman was in the back, Mickey was driving, and Mensi in the front passenger seat, reading the paper with the address in it. Says to Mickey, "Has this car got good tyres on it?" No sooner were the words said, one of the back tyres exploded. So ended up going sideways across the central reservation through the flower bed and the wrong way backwards down the John Reed Road. Menzies' head didn't once lift up out of the paper and then says, "Right, Nicky, fire it up and drive it away," but then realised the exhaust was left in the flower bed, so I had to put the spare wheel on and go back and pick it up. The first time Mensi and Norman Mickey went to London, Mensi of course taking his two mates, the whole group lived in a terrace house on Solway Road, Wood Green, and of course they had nothing in to eat, so Mensi, Norman and Mickey chipped in to buy some shopping. Mensi, being the good cook that he was, bought ham shanks from the butcher's to make some beer and ham soup, which he left to brew away overnight, only to wake up the next day to find Decker had got up during the night and ate all the ham out of the soup. Well, the two greatest loves in Menzi's life were Sunderland and cooking. He was taught good by his mum. He especially loved to make a curry and had all the spices you could imagine, forever tweaking them to get them just how he wanted them. There was a curry house in Turnpike Lane, London, which used to open up especially for Menzi and his mates, even after that shut at 12 midnight, and had the whole set of waiters hosting on them. It was the same place where Floyd ate 3 flans for a bet. And Menzi often had bets with people on who could eat the hottest curry, and he won plenty of them too. But when it came to the band, a proper workaholic, doing gig after gig, had some huge moments with his music, but was often targeted by the police on anti-fascist marches for no reason at all. He used to often wear disguises so that he wouldn't be recognised. But one thing he never shied away from, Menzi, was female attention. His daughter Victoria remembers when she turned 18, her dad went through a phase of wanting to go out drinking with her and her friends. And when chatting up the ladies, he'd introduce her as his sister. But one woman laughed right in his face, saying, "She looks like you just spat her out." And well, it's common knowledge that Menzi was a man who had many female partners over the years. He isn't his only child, and like most parents, for all, he might not have always gotten it right. Like that time when living in London, sent out for some milk, taking Victoria as a baby with him. He came back with the milk all right, but forgot Victoria. He'd left her outside the corner shopping after all. But he always did his best, and of course travelling around so much meant that he did have to sacrifice his family life. But then Max came along, his little soldier, and he's super proud, taking him to see Sunderland, and to have him up singing on stage with him, a legend in his own right, and could not deny, Menzi spat him right out. Dottie, well, she was the boss of the house, I'm told, and Menzi wouldn't have had her any other way, ruling the roost. When he became a granddad, well, Menzi gained so much joy from Isla, Troy, Maxwell, Quint Holly. One of the many things Victoria loved to do with her dad was celebrating all the kids' birthdays, and he hosted the best tea party, soft cloths too. The kids were allowed to do whatever they wanted. Having fun, being happy was all that mattered, even if it meant wrecking his home. Not that there was much to wreck, mind, he was never what you could call a tidy man, more lackadaisy in his living habits. So that's why he appreciated Elsie so much, but they looked after each other as brother and sister, really. To his family, he was always referred to as our Thomas. Soft-hearted Harry too, a huge heart. He'd help anyone in need. That time he organised a trip over to France at the spur of the moment to give aid to the refugees there. And anyone down on their luck, guaranteed Menzi would be the first to offer a helping hand. Something else he dabbled in was running pubs. There was the Sly Fox in Buttermore, and ended up with the Alexandra and Jarrow. Loved by his staff. He always took care of them so well. And the tenants that he had living above the pub, he saw them all right too. He had a few gigs in that Alexandra, one of them celebrating his 60th birthday, and was looking forward to performing many more gigs in the near future. He was a man with a good head on his shoulders, especially when it came to money, but a bit bizarre he was, going from one extreme to the other. Could never bear the thought of being ripped off, so was always on the lookout for them bargains. Loved the whoopsie deals in the supermarkets, he did, and at Christmas time when he'd be waiting till the last minute on a Christmas Eve from the discounted turkeys. Clothes and things that he needed for his home were bought at auction houses. He always came away with something, whether he needed them or not, and loved to mooch around a car boot. He even once had a stall at one. He thought nothing of paying for a Rolex watch, though, or a nice car. That's the opposite scale. And could never be told or swayed, as his mobility began to falter, when advised he should maybe think about getting a more practical car. Not Mensi. He did what he wanted. Life was always on his terms. But the last purchase, that caravan, he gained so much joy sharing that with those closest to him. For himself, found happiness and contentment just with a curry and a can of Diet Coke. Of course, there are so many memories that you all have of Mensi. Like I say, most best not said out loud where we are today. I could easily stand here all day and speak of them. Sadly, time doesn't permit where we are. But I know due to the restrictions of COVID, well, that allowed Mensi to do a lot of things that he probably wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, and especially spending time with those closest to him. They were greatly comforted. Time he possibly wouldn't have had otherwise. His social media accounts, well, they of course kept Mensi connected to his friends and his many fans, which he gained so much pleasure from. And Victoria is especially grateful to have had the opportunity to stay with her dad in his last few days and to be with him when he finally passed. Mensi has touched so many people in so many different ways, and there's no doubt he will be missed and leave such a huge void in all your lives. But he'll never be gone, not really. There's too much of him that remains through the influence that he's had on you and the special part that he's played in all your lives, and the memories, well, they are keepsakes that no one can ever take away from you. So at this point in our ceremony, could I ask that we take a moment to reflect on the special relationship we each had the privilege to share with Mensi. Those with religious faith may also like to use this time for private and personal prayer. That's not the band messing with the connections, is it?
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too. For I can't help falling in love with you. Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole with you, for I can't help falling in love with you.
There are many people who come and go in our lives, but not many leave a memorable or lasting impression. Well, Thomas Mensi certainly has. And I can tell you that the kind words and love that has poured out to his family and your attendance here today has greatly helped them get through this most difficult of times. So thank you all, and a special thank you goes out to those who've carried Mensi into the chapel today, to Gaz for sorting out the flag, to the Upstarts and Chris Wright for sorting out the music for this afternoon at the Whiteley's Club, where Victoria, Max and Dottie will be waiting for you all to join them to continue in this celebration of their dad's life. And for those wishing to make a donation in honour of Mensi, there'll be an opportunity to do so as we exit the chapel today. All proceeds have been greatly received by the Intensive Care Unit in Ward 7 in recognition for the exceptional care he received. So finally, we began our ceremony for Mensi today with Solidarity, one of the many songs he had written, and you all know the reference of Elvis. But to send Mensi on his final journey, it could only be with this last song, which needs no introductions. But please forgive me if I don't exit the chapel poor one. I'm not trying to do it justice. Thank you all.
Hey!